Have you been frustrated by lotions that promise to be ultralight, but once you make them, they're not? Do you want to make richer, thicker creams, but using more butters just isn't doing the trick? Or are you struggling to make lotions that work in a pump top bottle, even though your oils are old liquid and you don't have any butters or thickeners in there? Hey bees, I'm Marie from Humblebee and Me, and in this video, I'm going to teach you the #1 skill you need to formulate your very own lotions and creams. When I formulate emulsions, this is where I start. This decision is what all of my other formulation decisions are built on top of. This one skill will help you be able to look at a formulation and know if it's going to be really lightweight or really rich. You'll be able to powerfully adjust the viscosity and richness of your emulsions. And fundamentally, this skill will give you the ability to create exactly the emulsion you want to create. Just a quick reminder, this video is part of an ongoing free series I'm sharing all about lotion formulations. I've created a playlist with all of the videos in it, so make sure you save that so you don't miss a thing. And then every single one of these videos has a free partner blog post that's linked in the description box below the video that has even more information about it. So if you want to learn as much as possible about how to formulate your very own lotions, make sure you check those out too. There's a lot more in them because they're a lot easier to kind of skim, and I don't end up making like a 3-hour-long video every week. Okay, so without further ado, what is this amazing, fundamental, must-know skill that I have been teasing you about? It is determining and adjusting the size of your oil phase. I know this sounds really boring, most fundamental things kind of do, but I promise, stick around, learn how to do this, learn why it's important, and your brain will just be churning with formulation possibilities. What is the oil phase? Very basically, it's all the fatty stuff in our emulsion, our oils, our butters, our fatty thickeners, and our emulsifier all added up. So in the formulation that we're working with throughout this series, that's 15% liquid oil, 5% emulsifier, 20% oil phase. If you haven't yet watched the first video in this series where I teach you how to make this simple basic formulation that we are working off of, riffing off of in all of the other videos in this series, please make sure you check it out. It's really, really helpful, and I think watching that video is really important to you understanding this video. Very basically, the larger your oil phase size is, so the higher that percentage is, the thicker and richer your lotion is going to be, and the lower that number is, the smaller the oil phase is, the lighter and thinner your emulsion is going to be. So if you want to formulate a rich, thick lotion, you'd start with a large oil phase size, and if you want to formulate something that's really lightweight, you'd start with a low oil phase size, and if you want to do something in the middle, then you'd start with like a mid-average kind of oil phase size. So what is high, low, mid? Here's a rough guide. Broadly speaking, I'd say that an oil phase of less than 10% is very low. It's going to create ultra lightweight, very fluid emulsions. 10 to 15%, kind of small, you're still going to get quite lightweight emulsions that are low viscosity, but they're going to be, a bit richer and a bit thicker because that oil phase size is going up. 15 to 20% is kind of what I consider to be average. It's where I start as somebody who prefers lighter hand and face creams. So this is my sweet spot, and it creates formulations that tend to work well in pump top bottles, which I really like. 20 to 30% oil phase starts to cross into that sort of mid to heavy range. Of course, there's lots of variables, and anything above 30% is going to be really quite rich. So if you are looking at a formulation for an emulsion and you're wondering, how rich is this going to be? Add up all of those fatty ingredients. And if it's like 12%, it's going to be pretty light. And if it's like 40%, it's going to be pretty rich. It's such a helpful skill to have, to sort of know what you like in the size of an oil phase, and then you can look around and see it all. It's kind of like the Matrix with the code, and you can see the stuff in it. So that's the rough guideline, but how do you put that information into action? If you are starting from scratch, creating your very own formulation, begin by deciding how rich you want the finished formulation to be or how light, and then choose a oil phase size with that in mind. If you're starting with a pre-existing formulation, you'll know if you want to make it richer or lighter. And so if you want to make it richer, you know you're going to be increasing the size of that oil phase. And if you want to make it lighter, you know you're going to be decreasing it. Once you've adjusted the amount of oil in the formulation, you'll also need to adjust the emulsifier accordingly. Roughly speaking, for every 4 to 5% of oil, you'll need 1% of emulsifier. So in this formulation, if you decrease the oil by 5%, you decrease the emulsifying wax, the Redomulse SCG, by about 1%. Or if you added 7% oil to the formulation, you would increase the emulsifier by roughly 1.3%. There's a lot more information about how much emulsifier to use and how that decision impacts your formulations in the free partner blog post.
The general gist is that there is a recommended usage range for emulsifiers. And since the emulsifier we're using in this formulation is one that also contains thickening ingredients, where in that usage range your emulsifier use falls will impact the viscosity of your emulsion.
Now that you've figured out your oil phase, all that's left to do is to adjust the amount of distilled water in the formulation so everything still adds up to 100%. To really show you how changing the size of the oil phase impacts your formulations, I've prepared several versions of our base formulation with larger oil phases, keeping the percentage of the emulsifier the same relative to the size of the oil phase. So this is the original with 15% oil and 5% Redomulse SCG. This version works well in a pump bottle and has a pretty typical lotion-y consistency. This next version has 20% oil and 6.75% Redomulse SCG. I think this is getting a bit too thick for a pump bottle, but would do well in a soft squeeze tube. This next version has 25% oil, 8.5% Redomulse SCG, and I'd say we are firmly into tub and jar territory now, and most people would call this a cream rather than a lotion. And this last version has 30% oil, 10% Redomulse SCG, and this version is really quite rich and decadent. You could even call this one an emulsified body butter. So you can really see that as the size of the oil phase increases, the lotions get more viscous and richer. I also want to show you some versions of these formulations that use about half the emulsifier, so you can see how much the emulsifier use impacts the viscosity of your formulations. The formulations in the jars use a pretty high concentration of emulsifier, about the highest concentration I'd ever use. And the versions in the pump bottles use half the amount. Now, these pump bottle formulations are not proving to be very stable, but they do a good job of showing how much the emulsifier impacts the viscosity of the formulation. And you can still see the emulsions getting thicker as the size of the oil phase increases. This one is 15% oil, 2% emulsifier, and it's completely fluid. This one is 20% liquid oil, 2.75% emulsifier, and it's also very, very fluid. This next one is 25% oil, 3.25% emulsifier, and it's still fluid, but it is getting thicker and richer. So it's not really that super runny, drooly consistency anymore. And it is dramatically different from its counterpart with the higher emulsifier usage. And this last one is 30% oil, 4% emulsifier. And this is getting into what I'd consider lotions territory with a similar consistency to the base formulation, but it is much richer as it contains 30% oil instead of 15%. If you'd like to learn more about these runnier formulations and the experiment that they're part of, I made a video all about it as a patron exclusive. Please consider becoming a $10 a month patron to see that video and to get other awesome benefits like live ingredient analysis events and advanced access to all of my videos. And that is how to control how rich and viscous your emulsions are on a really structural level. I know there were quite a lot of numbers and percentages and just generally math in this video. So if you want to learn how to make a spreadsheet do your math for you, which is exactly what I do, click here to learn how to do that. It's an absolutely essential formulation skill that will make your life so much easier.